We are going to discuss some methods for illustrating educational concepts. And the notion here is to make sure that it's relatively easy for us to move away from purely verbal methods of instruction to methods that involve a combination of language and images. Now, I've got a couple of questions for you, and I will be asking you questions throughout this presentation. It's my hope that this will be a little bit interactive, or a lot interactive would be even better. One of the questions that I have for you, how many of you brought a computer and with the hopes that you would try some of these things? Okay, I will try to make sure that we have some time for that. Got another question for you here, just to get us all thinking along the same lines. I want you to think for a moment about the courses that you teach. If you are a trainer rather than a teacher, think about what you train. How many of you use a lot of visual illustrations in the teaching that you do? Okay. I want you to think some more. I want to get one or two volunteers here to give me an example. I want you to think about something that you teach that you just can't imagine teaching without illustrations. What is a concept where illustrations are absolutely essential? Who has an example for me?
Meteorology.
Hey, Scott?
Yeah. And I teach meteorology. You got to have visual illustrations to give to the student because it's really hard to explain, the physics parts about what's happening in the atmosphere.
Okay, so when you teach meteorology, you are talking to the students about things like the air temperature, the water vapor in the air, things like that, going up, forming clouds, maybe condensing around some particles, falling down as rain. You're looking at broad weather maps, things like that. That'd be very difficult to do without illustrations, yes. Who has another example? Nobody wants to be put on the spot. Well, I'm guessing that probably all of us have a few things that we teach that we just can't imagine doing without illustrations. And what I'm going to do here to start out with is to show you a couple of examples and talk to you about where these examples came from. How many of you are able to find all the images that you need or want to use just by going out and looking on the internet? Okay. How many of you feel comfortable about taking images off the internet, going to a presentation like this, or putting them on your website? And okay. We did get a few hands there saying yes. This is a big part of the reason I do this is because, honestly, I'm a little bit nervous about copyright issues. I don't want to take other people's images and do things with them. And then also, it just seems like the images that I find are not exactly what I'm looking for. I always want something a little bit different than what I find. So we'll start out here with one concept. In teaching safety and health, it involves, it's kind of an interdisciplinary discipline. We look at issues from physics, from engineering, from health, and from many other fields. Nuclear fission is one. This is something that I was working on recently. And just for a moment, I want you to forget about the nuclear part on this. What does the word fission mean? What does that mean? Everybody's bashful. Okay, splitting. So a nuclear fission means we're going to split the nucleus of an atom. And there are a variety of ways of doing this. In many fission reactors, the physicists start with uranium-235, a radioactive isotope, a very heavy element, and they will bombard that element with neutrons. When if the neutron passes closely enough to the uranium-235 atom, and if it's moving at the right speed, that uranium-235 atom, the nucleus may absorb that neutron, and then that uranium atom becomes unstable. It's no longer uranium-235, it's uranium-236. It becomes unstable and it splits apart. And when it splits apart, it releases enormous energy. And this is how we fire nuclear power plants. This is how some of the nuclear weapons are made. There can be a variety of reactions that take place when a nucleus is split. In this case, the reaction resulted in two atoms with lighter mass, strontium 100 and xenon 134. It also resulted in two neutrons. So we started out with one neutron heading toward this uranium atom. Now we have two neutrons. So what can we get if we get more neutrons out of this, more free neutrons than we started with, and we've got other uranium atoms in our reactor, then we can end up with something like a chain reaction. And if we have enough, if we're producing enough neutrons, then that becomes self-sustaining. Now, would that have been difficult to do without illustrations? It would have been extremely difficult to do. And I can tell you that I've searched the internet for illustrations that have the kind of license on them that I could take and use in different places without worrying about copyright, and I've never found ones that I like. So that's why I ended up making these. Now, are you interested in how to do this? Okay. My guess is this is kind of why we're here. I'm going to see if I can move this up here where I can reach it a little better. Those of you who brought a computer and who want to try any of this, this is PowerPoint. If you got PowerPoint or OpenOffice on your computer and you want to give this a try, give you an idea here of how this was done. This was done, nothing on here is drawn freehand. Okay, all of this is done with very simple shapes from PowerPoint. And can you see my cursor up there at the top? Under these drawing tools or above them. Over here we got some pretty standard shapes. And I'm just going to pull down the ones that were used in this illustration. Oops. Okay, click on that. I tried to drag it and you can't drag it. So I clicked on the oval, and then when I clicked on my screen it made an oval. We are also going to click here on the trapezoid, and we're going to need two of those. And we're going to have another, I'm not going to make every single, I'm going to make one of each thing on here. How's that? All right, we'll start out here. If you look at the nucleus of this atom, it's got protons and neutrons in it. The protons there, they can be any color you want. You know, these are not things that we can see. They don't actually have a color as near as we know. These are very tiny. And in reality, in a real atom, it would not be this compact. It would be, if the nucleus was that size, those electrons would be out probably several hundred yards from here. Okay, they're not this compact. But let's say that we want to make one of the neutrons, which I've colored blue here. I can start with this oval, and then what I can do, I can remove the outline, and then to make it look somewhat spherical, I can add a shadow to it. And that shadow does not show up very much because the neutron there is so large. So I'm going to show you what we can do to make the shadow bigger. But you see where I still am here. I'm over here in the drawing tools. We'll go to Shape Effects, and we'll go to the shadow. And I'm going to go to the bottom and click on Shadow Options. And when I do that, up here under Blur, I can make that shadow bigger. So you see what's happening to that neutron now? It's starting to look a little bit spherical. All right, we're getting some shading on there. So that is all these neutrons are in here. If I wanted that to be a proton, again, these really don't have any color, but I assigned a color to them just so that we could tell them apart. And I can, if I want to put a plus symbol on that to show that it's a proton, I can put a plus in there. I can change the color of that type. You can see it's a little bit difficult here to do this while I'm talking. I'm not as coordinated as some folks are, but then I can change the size of it. All right, so now that's how the nucleus of this thing was made. Anybody have any idea what these orbitals are? These with the electrons moving around there. Anybody know how these were made? Those are also an oval. Okay, and what we'll do first of all is go up under the shape fill and click no fill. Then if I want to change the color, I can. I can stretch it. I can tilt it. All right. And typically what I do on these is I will make a few protons and neutrons, a few of these electrons in the orbitals, and then I'll just start copying and pasting. Okay, I don't try to make all of those. You can't really see it, but out here the electrons, they're very tiny on here. What those are is a shape called a teardrop. And if we take that teardrop and we stretch the tail out, and again we can get rid of the outline, we can assign it a color, and we can put some shadow on it. And I'm just going to start here with these shadows. We've got a preset inner shadow. It's not big enough, so I'm going to drag the blur out. And if I wanted to, I could do other things to this. I could put a negative sign on it to show that it is an electron. If I wanted to make it look like it had a lot of energy, I might go up here to glow, put a little bit of a glow on it there. And as I look at this, it looks kind of dirty. I don't like that shadow that I've got on there, so we're going to change the color of that shadow to something brighter. Okay, and that looks like it's got some energy now, right? That looks like an electron. Okay, and then I can shrink that down, make it whatever size I want. Now typically what I'll do is I'll make these pretty large, and then I'll save them as JPEGs and put the JPEG in. For instance, that thing right there is a JPEG. It's from a larger one. I save the PowerPoint as a JPEG and put that there. Now if you're wondering what these trapezoids are, okay, we got this neutron coming in, and so what we've got there, we've got a trapezoid here. Now to make this look like this white part of the trapezoid, first thing that I'm going to do is get rid of that outline. Most of these things I do end up getting rid of the outline. We'll make it look white, but you see it still doesn't look the same as the other one. To do this, we go to make it look like it's moving, make the edges less defined. We go here under Shape Effects to Soft Edges, and let's do it about like that, about a 10-point soft edge. And then I can make this be the inner blue part of it if I wish. Let's see, I've got to make sure, you have to put these in the right order, otherwise they cover each other up. So I can stretch that out. I can make it a little bit small, a little bit narrower, put it in the middle, and we will take off the outline, and we will give this some soft edges. Okay, and just standing up here doing it quickly, that's kind of the way it came out. It doesn't look quite as good as the other. Now I want to ask you a question. After seeing how you can do this, how you can draw with shapes without really having to do anything freehand, how many think you've got the artistic ability to click and do that and then follow those instructions? Does that seem like something you could do? Okay. Has as you were thinking, as you were watching this, did anyone come up with any ideas, something that you think, I can do this to illustrate something I've been wanting to do? Anybody come up with an idea? Okay. Let's go ahead here. If you will look at your handout on the it's got several pages on it. The very first page, page 1A, That gives some ideas there of some drawings you can do using very simple shapes like that. And if you look down in that right-hand corner, you see that eyeball down there, a cross-section of the eyeball. With the exception of one of two parts on there, that was all drawn with those shapes that we just looked at. The two parts that are a little bit different, one of them is, they're not labeled on here, but the optic nerve, the part that goes back on the back of the eyeball, that was drawn a little different way, which I'll show you how to do that in a minute. And then around the lens, you will see, around the lens of the eye, you will see something that looks a little squiggly, and that was drawn a different way, and in a few minutes I'll show you how we do that, all right? Now before we move on, does anybody have any questions about very simple types of illustrations like this using the shapes in PowerPoint? Yes, Gary?
You constructed your atom there. At any point, did you group all of those objects together so you could change the size and have everything
Yes.
at the same time?
Yes, what I did on this, and again, this is a JPEG, so I can't really show you here. Now I can do that with this guy. Does everybody know how to make a JPEG? Okay, let's look at this. Up under File, Save As. Okay, and if we were to save this normally, we'd just save it as a PowerPoint presentation, right? Everybody's done that before, right? There are several options here. You can save this as a variety of images. This JPEG is right here. If you want an image with a lot more detail in it, these TIFF images, I think, end up being sharper, but they seem to use more space on the disk. Tell me why you should use PNG. Okay, all right. Okay. And I welcome comments such as that. What I want to tell you is I'm a teacher. I am not a computer technology person. So I am willing to learn from you all. All right, so if I click it like that and click Save, I can either save every slide in this whole presentation as a separate PNG, or I can save just the current slide, all right? If I save just the current slide, and then I go back, that is not the right folder, but if I go back here, I believe this is going to be it right there. That's going to be it right there. And I can simply copy and paste that into my PowerPoint, all right? Now, when you are drawing these things, you can draw them at a large size, group all the elements together. For instance, I could group these elements together. If I go up under Home, Arrange, Group, then if I move one, they all move. If I shrink one, they all shrink. If I expand one, they all expand. Now I will tell you one problem that you may run into on this. I used to do it that way, and in the past that atom there would have a lot of components in it, and they would all be grouped together like this. I stopped doing it that way because the shadings end up looking really weird when you shrink these things. I would say start out that way. That's the simplest way. Start out grouping them together and stretching them and shrinking them, because that's the simplest way. If you find out that your shadings end up looking strange, then make this thing as large as you can, save it as a PNG image, and then copy it and paste it back into your PowerPoint. Then you can shrink it and expand it, and the shadings won't be affected by that. Okay? All right, any other questions or comments on that? Does that seem like something that's simple enough that most of us could start out doing something like that? Okay. Let's look now at one which in reality is about as simple. It doesn't look as simple, but in reality, it's not much more difficult. A lot of the concepts that I teach in safety and health relate to anatomy, physiology, and disease processes. And one of the things that I wanted to show you here would be an illustration that might help a student understand the disease process in asthma. All right? So here we've got a silhouette of a person with the airways drawn in, a very simplified view. And when we breathe air, we can breathe through our nose or our mouth. The air passes down the pharynx or the throat, the larynx or the voice box, the trachea or the windpipe. The trachea then branches into two major passages, the main bronchi. Those bronchi then split into ever smaller airways. And if we get way out, very deep into the lungs, the very smallest of those airways are known as bronchioles. Now this is very simplified, but if we were to take a tiny section of lung tissue and examine it, when we first look at it, it looks just kind of like a jumble of structures. It's really hard to see much structure in there. But if this is dissected and looked at in slices under a microscope, eventually some structures start to emerge. Okay. And here, hopefully my computer won't fall off, we've got a small bronchus coming down, splitting off into ever smaller bronchioles, going into clusters then of alveoli. And these alveoli are tiny little air sacs within our lungs. Those are very small. A typical alveolus is about 200 micrometers in diameter. Now to give you an idea of that, if you will look at your handout and find a period somewhere at the end of a sentence, that period's about 500 micrometers. So those little structures there, you could fit two of those across a period. Okay? So these are very small structures. Now if we were to take that airway, an airway such as this, and take that bronchus and look at it in cross-section, it might look something like this. And in a normal, healthy bronchus, you can see that the airway is open. Air can pass through there very easily. With asthma, the walls, the surfaces of the airway become irritated, inflamed, and swollen. And in some cases, mucus may develop in there as well. And when this happens, it becomes difficult to breathe. Our chest may become tight. We become short of breath. We may wheeze and cough. Could I have explained that without images? What's that? It would have been very difficult to do that without images. So are you interested in seeing how this type of image might be done? Okay. Oh, I forgot to tell you. We're interested in asthma in occupational and agricultural health because it tends to be aggravated by biological particles in the air, such as the mold and dust that we get from handling old, wet, nasty grain in bins. Now, what I'm going to do here is get to where I can show you how some of these structures were drawn. First of all, some of the structures in here are just ovals. Okay, that's an oval right there. That went right here. Now that oval, now we'll see if we can reproduce that here. We'll give this a try. This oval, you may notice that the color on it, actually, here is where I've grouped some structures together. Okay, we've got a dark oval inside of it with some soft edges. So Gary, here's an example of grouping some things together. All right, so I can start with one oval. I may put an outline on it if I wish. In this case, I'm going to blow this up a little bit bigger so that we can see what that outline is. All right, that outline is probably a color, something like this. Actually, it may be darker than that. The inside of it, I think, is actually that color. Let's see. So let's give it a little bit darker outline here. And then we can take another oval and put it inside, give it a little darker color and some soft edges. We'll take the outline away. We'll give it some soft edges here. Make it a little bit bigger. And then we'll make it a little bit darker. Okay. So a lot of the structures on here are like that. These little alveoli here, those, okay, I've apparently dragged that onto something. You can see I've got a lot of stuff on here. I have to remember not to save this when I'm done. Let's look at what an alveolus is here. This alveolus is a circle with a very light colored shadow, or yes, a light colored shadow on it. See, the color of that shadow is pretty light there, and you can't see it very well when I've blown it up, so I'll drag it and make it a little bit bigger. Okay. Now the bronchi, now those are going to hide. We'll just make new ones. This is really about the only thing on here that's freehand, and these are just little branching structures, so this does not take much talent. How many think you could do what I'm doing right now? Okay, that doesn't take a lot of talent. Okay, get rid of the outline. We'll put some color in it and put a shadow on it. I want it to be a lighter color. First it's going to be dark, and then I have to change the color to make it light. Okay. So does that kind of explain how this was done? This little structure, okay, these right here are just little shapes that were drawn. Up here you see this tool that says curve. You can just draw little shapes like that, okay, and then give it soft edges, color, take away the outlines and so forth. All right. Any questions about that? That's just a slightly more complex type of drawing, but really not much. If you look at that, there's nothing in there that required much talent. Okay. Got one other kind of drawing that I want to show you, and then we'll talk about some other things. Oh, how many of you give PowerPoint presentations in your classes? Okay. Were you interested at all? Let's go back to this. This is, I did not want to do that. Yeah, it's rather hard to talk and do this at the same time. Okay. Now, do you know how to make things fade in on PowerPoint like that? Okay. That's a pretty simple thing, but just in case anyone doesn't know, the way that's done up here is a transition, and it's fade. You go to transitions and fade, and what it will do is it will go from the previous slide to this one in a period of time so that you get a fade in like that. All right, I want to show you another type of drawing here. Do any of you teach courses? Definitely have to remember not to save this. Any of you teach courses where you're dealing with human events or complex events happening over time? Well, in safety and health, we teach a lot of things that happen with people over time because we talk about how folks get injured. And I cannot go out and take pictures of people getting injured. I have a hard time finding volunteers for that. So I draw these, and this is a much more complex type of drawing, but in reality this doesn't take any artistic talent either. I just want to give you an example here of how this was used, hopefully to spark some ideas of how of whether or not something like this would work for you. I work a lot with farmers and other folks in agriculture on safety involving machinery, and tractors are always a big issue. And what we're going to look at here is one common way that folks get injured with tractors. Gary, I know that you have operated tractors before. Who else in here has operated tractors, agricultural tractors? Okay, quite a few folks have. Well, this is an accident that was reported by OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Again, it illustrates one of the common ways that folks have gotten hurt with tractors. And for this one, I want to make sure that I get the details right on exactly what happened in this injury, so I'm going to look at my notes here. As reported by OSHA, a worker was repairing an agricultural tractor. So here you can see this guy down there working. When the repairs were finished, he stood next to the tractor where he could reach the ignition, and then he turned the key to start the engine. Okay? What do you think is going to happen? Okay. Many of you know what's going to happen. How many of you have done this and had something happen? Okay. Well, this is one of the more common ways that folks get hurt on tractors. A tractor, if it is in gear, these older models will start in gear and they will just start off moving. And that's what happened in this case. He turned the key to start the ignition. Unknown to the worker, the tractor was in a forward gear, and when the engine started, it lurched forward. The tractor's right rear tire ran over the worker's chest. Other workers rushed to help, but his injuries were too severe. About all they could do was shut off the tractor's engine and contact emergency services. The worker was airlifted to a nearby hospital, but he died en route. This is actually the second most common way people get killed on tractors. The most common way is by rollovers, where you're on the tractor and it rolls over. Second most common way is runovers, and this is one of the most common ways that it happens with the runovers. After seeing that, is there anything you guys teach where something like this might be relevant? Are there things that happen with people, human events? Everyone's being quiet. All I can do is hope that there are thoughts going through your head. Okay, so are you interested in seeing how to do this? This actually is nowhere near as hard as it looks. Oh, before I show you how, let me show you first of all that it doesn't matter if your first attempts don't look exactly like some of these. My first attempts certainly did not. This is the story this is the illustration that I used in 2010. And believe it or not, had I not shown you these other images, you probably would not have laughed then. But it's funny because you've seen the other images, right? In reality, this works just about as well as the other. In 2010, those are all done with those standard shapes. There's a rectangle in there. A cube is one of those standard PowerPoint shapes. This is a cylinder that's a standard PowerPoint shape. We got a lot of ovals. These are just lines that I've made very thick. Okay, that was in 2010. 2011, I got a little more creative, and I used the curve tool to kind of draw this shape here and that shape there and the person. Last year, 2012, well, here you go. Here you see the progression. Can you see the difference even between 2012 and 2013? Look at the tractor tires, look at the human there. Okay. So it has evolved over time. Anyway, the point of this here is don't get the idea that everything has to look like it could be hanging in the Louvre the first time that you do it. All right. It will develop over time. Now, to show you how this was done, and I'm going to show you with the person here. I'll show you how the person was drawn. I am not an artist. I cannot draw a person, okay? Especially not on a screen. So what I do is I get a goofy looking person to pose for me. Can you tell who that is? If I turn around and squat, maybe you'll know who that is. All right. And when I do this, again, I like to shrink things down So I start out with a pretty large picture, and so that I can see that whole picture there, I make myself a separate PowerPoint that's much bigger than normal. And so this PowerPoint is 10 inches wide and 16 inches high. That way I can trace this at its full size, and then when I reduce it, it'll look okay. And what I do is I look at the parts of the body here that are in the background. For instance, the hand is in the background, so I'm going to need to draw it early on. The shirt then is on top of that, so I want to draw the hand first, then the shirt. I'm probably going to draw the head before I draw the shirt as well. The overalls here are the last thing that I'm going to draw. But I do those in order, and just so I don't get lost here, I'm going to mark my place there, and I'm going to zoom in to the hand. So I zoom to 400%. Now we can see my hand. And I'm going to go up under the tools. And there's a couple different ones that you can use here. I like to use this curve tool right here because it gives some pretty nice smooth edges, so if I mess up, it's not too big a deal. And I'm just going to kind of draw the outline of the hand, and I'm not going to worry about where the wrist starts because that's all going to be covered up with the shirt. I'm only going to worry about the parts here that are showing. Now again, the shirt will cover this part of it eventually. So what I want to do here, I like to, you notice that there was some dark shadow here between my thumb and my forefinger. I want to get that in there. So I'm just temporarily, I'm going to hit no fill so that I can see my hand again. And then I'm going to draw this little area right here. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Right now, we're going to make this hand look something like a hand. I'm going to get rid of the outline. I'm going to make it flesh colored. We'll go with that one. I am going to give it a shadow so that it looks like it has some depth. So we'll go to the preset shadows. That makes it look like I've got some disease that's making my skin weird. So I'll get a little more natural shadow there. Okay, now this guy right here, we need it to look like a shadow between my thumb and my forefinger. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to get rid of the outline, and then up here you can get, let me show you how we get to this. We go to shape fill, and then we want gradients, and I'm going to click more gradients. We're going to turn this into a gradient, and what I'm going to do here is we're going to use flesh colors. Oops. Here's my color. We'll have a dark color, medium color, a light color. Now that still looks weird, so what we're going to do here is we're going to make these transparent. We'll try right here under transparency. You have to do that for each of these three colors. I'm going to make them all 70%. Okay, now if I back off of this to 100%, okay, it's starting to look a little bit like a shadow there, right? Again, I make these really big so I can shrink them so that the imperfections in this doesn't show. Okay, having done that, here's one that I finished, okay? So I drew all those parts on it. What I can do next is get rid of my background. I just highlighted it and deleted it. And Gary, all of these are separate parts that are grouped together. If you want to see what some of these look like, if I ungroup them, I've got a head, up here so that I can make my head do that. That's a little extreme there. Exorcist, we could do the Exorcist with this here by moving the head around. All right, anyway, take one here that I haven't messed up. And I can save this now. And we will save this as a PNG. And I'm going to tell it to do every slide in there. So now I can go find where I saved this. That's not it. That was called worker. Here we go. So here it is right here. And what I'm going to do is copy that. And I'll go back to my PowerPoint. I'm going to paste that in. You see how big that is? You see it's got a white background. We can get rid of that white background if we hit Remove Background. And I'm going to make this, I want to make sure that I can see this whole thing so I can see if we're getting rid of our background or not. It looks like we are. Okay, so now I've got my person. I can shrink him down and I can put him up there like that. Okay? Now, if you wanted to do something like that but didn't want to draw it, if you didn't want to trace it, here's another thing that you can do. And I've got some notes to myself over here so that I remember which direction I do this from. Removing the background on this guy is a little bit harder because of all the stuff that's back there. So if I do this in the right order, it will come out the best. See how I'm moving this border right here up close to it? There I did the left side, now I'm going to do the right side. The order of doing this, you just have to experiment with each image to see which way gets rid of most of the background. Okay, so now I've just got this guy, and you can see there's still some stuff in there. But I can right-click on that picture. I can hit Format. I can go over here to Artistic Effects, and let's say I want this to look like some kind of a drawing. So I've done that. The artistic effect here was called Marker. Okay? And I can copy that thing and paste it in here. Oh, that's not very big. I did the same thing with the tractor, but I can copy the worker, put him in, shrink him down. I should not have shrunk my screen yet. But I can shrink him down and get him in there as well. Okay, so that's kind of a shortcut. Yes, Charlene? Okay, 5 minutes. All right, now, I wasn't sure how much time we'd have. I'd hoped that maybe we'd get to doing some video things as well. We didn't get there. What we've done here is we've talked about using the drawings. And I want to show you a couple of things on this handout that you have. The first page showed you how to draw with very simple shapes. The second page kind of goes through those more detailed drawings with humans in them. The next front and back page talk about making videos, which we did not get to. Another thing I really want you to look at is this last page. It's got two sides on it. Page 3A says make an illustrated transcript. How many of you use videos in your distance courses? Okay. A video can be a very good way for students to become familiar with new information, but when it comes to actually studying, has anyone ever tried to study off a video? It's pretty much impossible. So we need to have transcripts, and it seems that if we will put pictures from the film on those transcripts, that transcript then can become a standalone educational resource. If you flip that over and look at the back side, I do like to get the students involved in class. So typically, after they've had some introductory material, give them problems to work on. And this is an example of one problem. If you look through this example here, the students looked at a case in which some folks got hurt inside a tanker car, and down at the bottom of that, they have some tasks that they have to accomplish, and that's kind of how they learn, and then they come back and visit with other students in the class. Okay, does anybody have any questions? I know we did not get to do too much interactive with that. We have the next session coming up in about 10 minutes. So I think we've got 10 minutes now to take a break and use the restrooms and the other things that you need to do. And if anybody has any questions, I will be hanging around here for a few minutes. All right, have a great afternoon.